My name is George Nathaniel Curzon. I am a most superior person. My cheek is pink, my hair is sleek. I dine at Blenheim once a week.
Why can't they let me forget that facetious, that appalling doggerel?
George Curzon is the only man I know who could make an impassioned speech in his pajamas without looking ridiculous.
Weekend at Montacute by Michael Robson. In November 1922, Lloyd George's coalition government came to an end, and the Conservative Party under Andrew Bonar Law was given control of the country. 6 months later, Bonar Law's ill health obliged him to take a convalescent cruise. By Whitsuntide of 1923, King George and Queen Mary were at Aldershot. Stanley Baldwin, Chancellor of the Exchequer, was looking forward to a country weekend. And George Nathaniel, Lord Curzon, the Foreign Secretary, was at his London home in Carlton House Terrace. Paul Rogers as Lord Curzon, Mary Wimbush as Lady Curzon, and Alan Rowe as Stanley Baldwin in Weekend at Montacute.
How ghastly. How absolutely ghastly.
What's your address?
The dress, the hat, the shoes, the tutu, and so on.
Oh, the Vogue and Paris House shoes.
You do far better at Derry and Tom's, and at half the price.
My money, darling. My money paid for the ensemble.
Quite immaterial. You know how I abhor extravagance.
Oh, I never heard such nonsense. It's these curtains and you, aren't they? Were they absolutely necessary?
I had them run up in Fulham and insisted on a discount for cash down. Saved £7.14 and 6.
And what did you do with the old curtains?
I sent them to Montacute. They do very well in the study.
I didn't very pleased with yourself, George. It is entirely due to a cash saving on curtains.
I'm pleased to have you back again. I miss you, Grace. I do wish your tours of the continent would be rather less extensive.
Oh, but now it's so much more interesting than London. Everyone's more tuned out that you're young.
Paris was so much more interesting. Presumably the focus has shifted. That's why you're back.
George, what are your chances?
What can you be talking about?
Oh, don't be evasive. Not at a time like this.
Why did you come back from Paris so abruptly? I can't believe it was merely to hold my hand.
George, stop it and tell me what you know.
I know that the Prime Minister is presently aboard a Dutch liner, convalescing on the advice of his physician. In his absence, I've been presiding over the cabinet meeting.
You can be so disingenuous.
I've had 30 years' experience, rather more.
The Prime Minister is dying.
Is what?
Bonar Law is dying, George. They give the poor man 6 months. Are you trying to tell me you didn't know?
What have you learned?
Rudyard Kipling met the Prime Minister at Exchequer. He was intending to entertain him, but he realized immediately that Bonar Law was in no condition for socializing. Now, I have this at first hand. The Prime Minister looked so ill that Kipling telephoned Beaverbrook, and Beaverbrook arranged for Tommy Horder to sail for France at once.
You have a remarkable intelligence network.
Someone has to safeguard your interest.
Bonar Law is a great man, a fine man. I will not have his indispositions made the subject of a society gossip.
Oh, play the dissembler in Parliament by all means, but not with me.
Of course, there have been rumors.
Rumors?
The lower house has been frantic with gossip for weeks now. Eventually, a moment was reached when I could not sensibly ignore them any longer. I sent a note to the Prime Minister not a fortnight ago requesting a meeting with him at Downing Street.
George? What is the urgency?
The rumors of your imminent resignation are flying thick and fast. I felt it was time to squash them.
Rumors? Where are they coming from?
From both sides of the house, Bonar.
You believe them yourself?
My one concern is to impose tranquility upon an excited cabinet. I think a statement should be made.
They need to have something to gossip about in the silly season.
You aren't prepared to take it seriously.
Well, there has to be something more than cabinet discipline at stake. You've always been a realist. What precisely is worrying you?
Are you ill? Do you intend to resign?
But if conjecture such as you mentioned had any foundation in truth, Where would it leave you?
Prime Minister, 3 times recently I've publicly repudiated canards such as this. If I'm to go on repudiating it, I should like to do so with your full knowledge and approval.
Yes, do sit down, George. Take a glass of Madeira.
Is this a propitiation?
It's an offer of a glass of Madeira. Winston gave me a dozen bottles recently, and I rarely touch the stuff.
Winston sees himself as the next foreign secretary.
You've come with a perfect hamper full of rumors, haven't you?
Oh, thank you. I can enjoy this. You are drinking?
Later, perhaps.
Winston is only one of several who claim to have their ears to the ground. I really don't believe we can dismiss it all with a glass of Malmsey.
Let me ask you this. Now, if the chair were left vacant quite suddenly, what would your attitude be?
For you to retire now would be a national calamity. I mean it, Bonar.
I respect your sincerity. Mr. Graham, would you stand? I should like to know. I should be interested in your blueprint for the future.
Is it necessary for me at this stage in my career to trot out yet another curriculum writing?
George. George, you're a senior and valued servant of the state. The contribution to post-war diplomacy is incalculable. Why are you so on edge?
The king must know. Our colleagues must know. The nation must know. I must be allowed to know. Is there any foundation in these rumors? Or not? Either way, we can no longer appear to be whistling in the dark. It would be, forgive me, but it would be irresponsible to affect that no such gossip is current.
I can always trust you to draw the line whereon my toes must rest.
I hope I have your trust, as you have my loyalty.
Was your loyalty ever in doubt?
You haven't answered my question.
Nor you mine.
Very well, then. If, in the unlikely and tragic event that you were obliged to stand down, I should hope and believe that when the time came for you to recommend to the king your successor in office, your choice would be me.
Yes, but would you be willing to serve once more under another leader and give to him the diligence and devotion you've given me?
Such claims as I might have to the office of Prime Minister, I could not and would not surrender. Nor should I consent to serve under any of my present colleagues. As to this, I'm quite clear, quite resolved. I'm your senior colleague, Bonar. I'm the only member of the cabinet who has served continuously since 1915. Is it true, then? You are intending to resign?
The rumors are no more than that. Oh, as you know, I haven't held up to the mark for a month or so. But a relaxed throat and a weary body are the occupational hazards of any politician. Mr. Thomas Horder has advised a short cruise, and in this instance I shall take his advice. And when the time comes for me to sail, Baldwin must lead in the Commons, and I shall expect you to preside cabinet meetings. So God knows you could do with a rest yourself.
So, I may repudiate the gossip immediately.
Repudiate? Denounce it, George. Denounce it with all the vigor at your disposal.
But you didn't believe him. You didn't entirely believe him.
It was far from well. That much was evident. But I'd no idea matters were so serious with him.
Beaverbrook certainly thought so. He shunted Bonar Law off to Paris, where Tommy Horder examined him. He told Beaverbrook privately that the trouble in the throat was malignant. He's unlikely to see the year out.
This is a terrible thing. Terrible.
I have the greatest sympathy for him, but sympathy isn't going to produce his successor.
But Beaverbrook, what's he up to now? What candidate can he be lobbying for? It certainly won't be me.
I know this much. Beaverbrook had a private audience with Lord Crewe in Paris only yesterday.
Of what use can the ambassador be? He carries no weight in home affairs, nor would he expect to.
Oh, I appreciate that. I also know that Beaverbrook does nothing without a very good reason for it. He saw Crewe, and they discussed the situation very thoroughly.
How can you conceivably know what they discussed in a private interview?
You forget my friends at court. Lady Crewe herself told me the substance of the entire discussion.
My dear Max, what can I say? Does Sir Thomas hold out no hope whatsoever? I mean, is surgery not possible?
Sir Thomas is as anxious as I am to keep Bonar in office. But he feels now that it would be cruel to expect him to continue working any longer.
So what will the Prime Minister do?
He means to return to London, set his house in order before tendering his resignation to the King.
Yes, of course. Poor man. Poor man. But if ever we needed his courage and integrity, we need it now.
But since he's been persuaded to give up office, I want to believe he can renounce the cares of office as well. And at present, it's not feasible.
I don't follow you. Surely he can't mean to sit in the house as a backbencher.
Lord Crewe, I haven't come here to indulge in mutual commiseration over Bonar. We both know what we feel on that score. I've come about something more immediate. There still remains an intolerable burden on his shoulders. And if it's to be lifted, I need all the advice I can get.
I'm at your disposal, naturally.
It's no exaggeration to say that Bonar is obsessed with the need, as retiring Prime Minister, to recommend to the King his successor in office.
I fail to appreciate his quandary. There's only one possibility, Lord Curzon.
And that's the burden on Bonar Law's shoulders. He has no wish to recommend George Curzon to His Majesty.
But what alternative is there?
Baldwin's leading the Commons at present. He must be regarded as a serious contender by some, not by me.
Baldwin? Well, I know so little about the fellow.
He's a Johnny-come-lately to higher politics in comparison with Curzon. He completely mismanaged the American debt settlement.
Then what is the objection to Curzon? He's been leader of the Lords for 6 years. He's held high offices of state for over 30 years. He's a considerable administrator.
But no one likes him, and no one trusts him.
I take exception to that. When was Curzon ever untrustworthy?
I'm not talking about his morals. I'm talking about his political expediency. The man's a trimmer. He'll stop at nothing to gain power and keep it.
It's not my place or wish to argue Lord Curzon's merits. It's my belief he's the man for the job. But if Bonar Law cannot find it in his heart to recommend him, then there's nothing I can say that will alter his intention.
Curzon and Baldwin. Scylla and Charybdis. Which way is Bonar to direct his sails?
You believe there is no one, absolutely no one else, who might fill the bill?
Non-entities, mediocrities, and charlatans.
Take a poor view of our politics, Lord Beaverbrook.
The nation lacks a leader.
Curzon is the leader.
But what does he know? What can he know of the wishes of the electorate? The man's lived in marble mansions all his life. He's an autocrat and a proven megalomaniac.
You're overstating your case quite preposterously. Without Curzon's fantastic application and diplomacy during the Lausanne conference, we might well be fighting a war in the Balkans even now. It does no credit your grasp of history to belittle his many achievements.
Crewe, at this moment, it doesn't matter a tinker's damn what you and I may think of Curzon or Baldwin. Bonar Law doesn't want either of them to succeed him. So, how is he to advise King George? He needs help.
As to that, recent history has shown that the retiring Prime Minister is under no specific obligation to name his successor. When Gladstone retired, Queen Victoria chose my own father-in-law to follow him in office, even though Mr. Gladstone, had he been consulted, would most certainly have chosen someone else. And more recently, Herbert Asquith was named as Prime Minister by King Edward, without reference to Campbell Bannerman.
No. Is that so? Is that so? You've reassured me enormously. So long as Bonar knows there are precedents, he'll accept the situation more readily.
And the responsibility will rest with the King. When will he choose?
I think we may assume that His Majesty will seek informed opinion first.
And the choice must inevitably be Lord Curzon.
In politics, nothing is inevitable, except ultimate disillusion.
And you had this direct from Lady Crewe?
She is my ally, George, and therefore yours. As is Crewe himself, so far as he's able to indulge in caucus hunting. They both believe you must attempt by every means at your disposal to win Beaverbrook to your cause. It's far and away the most influential voice in Bonar Law's ear.
Can you imagine me grovelling before Beaverbrook, that irrational colonial adventurer? How ghastly, absolutely ghastly.
For once we're in total agreement. You don't need Beaverbrook. As far as the diplomatic service is concerned, you are the only contender.
Well. And so you come back, prepared to play the active wife of a prime minister, if not of a foreign secretary.
George, you must never confuse me with the First Lady Curzon, as you're sometimes in danger of doing. True, Mary was American, and so am I. True, Mary was extremely wealthy, and so am I. True, we were both by no means reluctant to marry into the British peerage. True, we both brought impressive dowries to the Curzon Exchequer. But there, the resemblance ends. Mary tasted power with you. She was Viceroy of India at 27. I could have settled for Viceroy, but nothing less. And since to be Viceroy is now impossible, I must set my sights higher. Within the next few days, I think it more than likely that you will become Prime Minister of Great Britain. You will be, in effect, the most influential man in the world. And believe me, George, I shall be at your side every step of the way.
You've never shrunk from the blatant truth, have you? Your ambition is as naked as mine. Your determination as unyielding.
How very vice-regal you can be. Did you know that?
Come here, Gracie. Give your poor old husband a kiss.
I've missed you. I've missed you. And what shall we do for Whitsuntide?
Oh, Montacute. I thought Montacute. I have already made the arrangement.
Well, I suppose Somerset in May should be quite relaxing.
Loveliest time of the year by far.
I'm inclined to agree. But couldn't it be dangerous?
Well, Somerset isn't renowned for breeding political assassins.
Careers can be assassinated as well as lives. London will be the battleground, not Somerset.
But what's going to happen? What can happen over Whitsuntide? Every politician I know will be house partying. London will be a wilderness. Even the tradesmen have a day off on Monday. I can hardly imagine either Beaverbrook or Baldwin will attempt to lobby in an empty citadel.
No, I'm not so sure London will be entirely without activity this weekend. I hear, for example, that John Davidson is out and about and building a case for Baldwin.
Davidson, that smug little backbench pipsqueak.
Be careful. I know you despise Davidson, and he knows it too, and that could make him a formidable enemy.
Davidson can no more dislodge me from the path to premiership than a mouse can kick an elephant over the Hindu Kush.
If anything's to be done, Mr. Baldwin, it must be done this weekend. The King will expect constructive advice within a very few days, and we must be on hand to prepare that advice. What time is the Prime Minister expecting you?
At 6.
I had my man run you round there.
No, I'd rather you didn't. It would be more politic if I had to take a cab. I have the highest regard for Bonar Law. I wouldn't want him to think his party was splitting into factions the moment he laid down office.
He knows politics. He knows perfectly well that vultures gather whenever there's a prospect of carrion. We can't allow the party to be seen to be leaderless.
I appreciate your concern, Davidson. Nevertheless, I shall take a cab to Onslow Gardens.
Very well, as you wish. But promise me one thing. Promise me two things.
Tell me what they are.
One, that you'll use your best endeavors to discover whom the Prime Minister intends to name as his successor, whether it's embarrassing or not. Two, that you'll join me at the Argentine Club immediately after your meeting with him. Whatever he says, whatever he intends, we have 3 days in which to find an acceptable leader. In any event, Sir Ronald Waterhouse is at Onslow Gardens at the moment, attempting to take some of the strain from Bonar Law. I should pay close attention to what he has to say. He has the Prime Minister's confidence more than ever during this time of crisis.
Mr. Baldwin, come in. Here, let me help you. Glad you arrived so promptly.
Prime Minister is waiting to see you.
How is he, Sir Ronald?
He is under the weather, as you can imagine, but full of courage. He'll be pleased to see you, I know.
Yes, we've heard nothing but rumors at the house. It's been unpleasant and, unsettling.
And I think you should hear the news from Mr. Bonar Law himself.
I see. He's in the study?
I'll take you in directly. But, Mr. Baldwin, if you can spare the time, I should be grateful for a few minutes after your interview.
You too. Suddenly I appear to be in demand. Has Lord Curzon seen the Prime Minister yet?
Lord Curzon has not been invited.
Is he expected?
I think it improbable. Come, let me take you in. Before we go to Montacute, before we do anything, I must talk to you about money. Grace, you're living beyond my means. I lie awake at night worrying myself half to death. Have you any idea what running this house in Hackwood alone cost last year?
No, my dear, I haven't, but I'm perfectly certain you'll enlighten me.
I have it to hand. I have the exact figure to hand. I spent a wretched weekend casting the accounts, and Grace, they terrify me. £20,389, 15 shillings and threepence. I simply cannot sustain this level of spending. I shall be destitute by summer if we carry on like this.
George, has it ever occurred to you that one reason why you see so little of me is that when I am with you, you insist on talking of nothing but money and the state of your health?
Because money and the state of my health go hand in glove. Flowers, Grace. Look what you spent on flowers alone. Stevens' bill for the floral arrangements for 3 small luncheon parties was £75. We could buy an interest in Kew Gardens for that kind of money.
Well, Stanley, here it is. Not the easiest of situations for any of us. But I must be frank. It would be impertinent and irresolute of me to be anything less. You're determined, then, to make no recommendation as to your successor? I cannot undertake that responsibility. Yet within a few days the Conservative Party must have a new leader, and the country must have a new Prime Minister. Is His Majesty to draw lot? I appreciate your concern. I understand your dilemma. But where is the choice before? I mean, we must absolutely know. You're learning aggression, Stanley. And that's not a bad thing for a rising star in the political firmament. Yes, so you forced me against the ropes.
All I want is the truth. The simple truth.
Very well. There are no rabbits in my hat, no aces up my sleeve, no dark horses in my stable.
I admire your fund of metaphors.
I'm glad you can smile. I'm glad you can still smile. Yes, the contenders are clearly George Curzon and yourself. Now, since you press me, I must tell you that I believe you are too inexperienced for the post.
As I do. Believe me, as I do.
Ah, you acknowledge that? Yes, but on the other hand, I believe Curzon's too autocratic to command the loyalty of the Tory party. How can I, then, truthfully, recommend either of you to King George?
Well, Bonar, I asked for it and I got it. Thank you for frankness, at least.
Oh, my dear boy, time plays pranks on us all. Learn patience and fortitude. You still have a lot of years to run.
I have an insatiable curiosity. How do you imagine that the king will decide?
Well, we cannot evade the fact of George Curzon's intellectual supremacy, nor his unparalleled grasp of international affairs, nor his legendary, I must say, his fantastic industry. He is a most superior person. And it wouldn't come amiss if his lifetime's dedication to the country and to the empire were recognized. Yes, provided the recognition doesn't come from me.
Oh, I'll concede that George is a great man. He has us all in awe.
But...
Yes.
spot. Set aside, if you will, your prejudices for one moment. You have a duty to the party which must outweigh all other considerations. Now, I believe the King will appoint Lord Curzon. Would you be prepared to serve under him?
You may rely on me to act correctly.
Lavery, sir.
Who?
Sir John Lavery.
How dare he come here after that travesty?
I was half expecting him. I want to talk to him alone. I want to talk finance with him alone. Would you please go upstairs and superintend the packing? My man's sure to include all manner of unlikely clothing unless you're there.
All right. Just so long as you promise to convey to Sir John in no uncertain terms my unqualified displeasure with that picture.
And that is the reason for our meeting this evening. But he can cool his heels in the library for 5 minutes. It may give him time to arrive at a more reasonable attitude to his work.
I understand from outside sources that my portrait of Lady Curzon does not meet with your approval.
In my evidently jejune folly, I had imagined that a prerequisite of a portrait would be that the artist produce a creditable likeness of the subject. There is the portrait, Sir John. Does it in any particular resemble my wife?
Resemble? It is Lady Curzon.
Strange, then, that the entire household staff and a wide circle of friends should fail to share your discrimination.
A portrait such as this was never meant to be the apotheosis of some motion picture heroine in which accuracy is subordinated to glamour and reality to fantasy.
It displeases me, sir. It has mortally offended my wife. It cannot be allowed to hang in the staterooms at Kettleston along with more recognizable portraits of the Curzons and their wives.
Yet you were willing enough to allow it to appear on display at both the Glasgow and Liverpool art galleries, were you not? Bearing its full description and ownership. Or can it be possible that the likeness was altered in transit?
The flippancy is the last reaction I should have expected.
And your dissatisfaction is not what I had anticipated when I accepted the commission. The portrait has been in your possession for some time now, Lord Curzon, and I must remind you that you owe me £1,200 for it.
The discussion of that fee is the purpose of this interview.
Are you intending to revoke an already completed commission? If you do, I shall see you answer for it in a court of law.
I have no intention of paying the full fee for a portrait of my wife that I shall never display.
I see. How much am I expected to lose as a result of your displeasure?
I should find it seemly in you to make some offer yourself.
But I am not a seemly man in matters of this nature. I have a living to earn, and it isn't done by taking involuntary cuts in my feet.
Sir John, I'm leaving for Somerset directly. I want this matter settled at once.
Then tell me what you have in mind.
A 50% reduction, since the portrait is of no earthly use to me.
£600? That's an affront that I'm not prepared to tolerate.
Very well, then. A third. Reduce it by a third, and let's have done.
With extreme reluctance, and only because if I stay here a moment longer, I may offer physical injury to you, I shall accept a fee of £800, on condition that you reveal this to no one. No one! And now, good evening to you, sir. Have the portrait sent to my studio next week.
Sir John.
Yes?
I shall want the frame back.
I beg your pardon.
The frame is mine. I had it made for that specific painting, and it was costly. I shall want it back.
Damn your impertinence, Curzon!
Is the fish to your liking, Mr. Baldwin?
The fish may be a paragon of its kind, Davidson, but to me at the moment everything tastes of oiled spring. It's a mistake, however, to invite me to the club this evening.
Nonsense. A good dinner and a few glasses of wine will send you to rights quickly enough.
You're on edge.
That's all.
This is no mere edginess. I'm frankly appalled at the prospect before the party. And the fish. It has no leader.
And do try a little sauce with your fish. They prepare it particularly well here. Of course, we have a leader in you.
I must make myself irrevocably clear. I'm unready for the total responsibility of this kingdom and the empire. I'm inexperienced in the overall framing of national and international policy. Within Cabinet, within Commons, our party is divided, and I am not the person to act as coalescing force. Not yet.
I've never seen a man so reluctant for ultimate office. Curzon must be straining in the slips now for the very prize you have no wish to compete for.
The Curzon's no stranger to power, to authority, to dominion. He has no reservation about governing the entire world tomorrow morning, with a position open to him. Oh, to you it's amusing, no doubt. Can you believe I'm protesting in order to be further reassured? Well, I'll have some more wine now, waiter, if you please.
Sir.
Thank you. What can I say to you, Davidson? What message can I give to you and to Ronald Waterhouse and the rest of your cabal, bent so assiduously on propelling me onto that terrifying eminence, that peak of loneliness on which I have no present desire to dwell? Well, tell them this, and tell them I mean it with all my heart and soul. I would rather take a single ticket to Siberia than become Prime Minister of Great Britain.
So, Parsley, champion, the white ash of the hawthorn.
Cuckoos and greenspanches.
Why do we stay away from Montacute so long?
Oh, look at that little thing.
Oh, yes. Yes, a white folk. Poor little beggar.
What?
He always seems to me the tatterdemalion of the hedgerows. So starved, so precarious.
I prefer you like this.
Like what?
Oh, you know, knowledgeable squire.
At times like this, on mornings like this, I truly pity he who was not born an Englishman.
You are so unbelievably pompous.
Because I love the country. My country.
Ah, thank God you can still occasionally surprise me.
Have you seen the wood? Have you looked into the wood? The mist of bluebells.
I was never really aware till now how much of a naturalist you are.
The colonel of a regiment should know the name of every soldier he commands. His faith, his dialect, his hometown, his domestic situation, his military abilities, his private longings. Even so should we, as landowners, respect and know the earth we occupy. Otherwise, we're simply parvenu, and should be whipped at the cartwheel.
Why are you so demoralizingly clever?
Clever? I'm not clever at all. Merely knowledgeable. If I were clever, I should be writing a poem about this town and these birds. Those ringing cries, echoing from a green world full of shifting images, would be my benison on an antique world whose beauty we can never fully comprehend.
Only be grateful for.
Only be grateful for.
What in heaven's name is that noise?
It must have been a stag. He's heard our approach. He's frightened.
Let's go back. Let's not disturb him. He must be terrified.
I wonder if Rutledge knows we have strayed deer on these things. He hasn't mentioned them to me.
Perhaps he keeps them for the pot.
Rutledge has no killer's instinct.
Unlike the rest of your acquaintances.
What do you want about now?
I was thinking of Davidson and Colonel Waterhouse.
Morning, Sir Ronald.
Ah.
See you, Davidson.
Come, sit you down. Sit you down.
Yes. Thank you.
How did I beg your pardon, my dear fellow. No, I was going to ask how your meeting with Baldwin went last evening.
Chap's an enigma. He absolutely wishes not to be Prime Minister.
He's going to have greatness thrust upon him, isn't he?
And Beverly certainly won't accept any form of dragooning. I tried to persuade him to come round here this morning and have another word with Bonar Law, but he's gone back to the country.
Curzon's at Montacute.
Extraordinary, isn't it? The contenders, far from clapping it out in the ring, refuse even to come near the stadium. Curzon, because he acknowledges no competition at all, and Baldwin, because he has no interest in the trophy.
I think it would be extremely dangerous if the king should learn of the full extent of Baldwin's reluctance. It might just tip the scales in favor of Curzon.
Now, look, Sir Ronald, however little we care for Curzon, we cannot deliberately hoodwink His Majesty. His private secretary, Lord Stamfordham, has specifically asked me to set down my views, as I suppose a well-informed backbencher. In the circumstances, how can I possibly tell him that Baldwin is willing and eager to succeed Bonar Law when I know it's the last thing he wants to do?
But have you thought of the consequences if you fail to push for Baldwin?
Where's the Prime Minister now?
He's in the study, preparing his letter of resignation to the king.
Do you think he might be able to draw up any generalized advice on a number of candidates?
Oh, my dear Davidson, the one letter is taxing him sufficiently. We can't add to his anxieties.
Well, then I shall have to prepare a memorandum of my own. It can go to Lord Stamfordham along with Bonar's letter of resignation. Is King George in London today?
At Aldershot. Stamfordham's with him and waiting to hear from us.
Then I'd better begin at once.
You're absolutely clear, aren't you, as to what you're going to say?
The unquestionable facts. The resignation of the Prime Minister makes it necessary for the Crown to exercise its prerogative in the choice of Mr. Bonar Law's successor. There appear to be only two possible alternatives, Mr. Stanley Baldwin and Lord Curzon. The case for each is very strong, and for this very reason the King is being presented with an extraordinarily sensitive choice, the resolution of which could radically affect the future of British democracy.
Get it done. Draw up the memorandum, and Sykes and I will take it to His Majesty and Lord Stamfordham at Aldershot directly.
Your Majesty?
This memorandum is the work of Mr. Davidson, I take it?
He submitted it at my invitation, perhaps.
And it's a very cogently argued document. It was, as I understand, prepared at Mr. Bonar Law's home.
Yes, that is the case.
Solely by Mr. Davidson?
Mr. Davidson's signature is appended.
Yes, but did he ever consult with the Prime Minister before or during or even after the composition of this memorandum?
I'm afraid I have no idea, sir. All the information I have was furnished by Colonel Waterhouse this afternoon. He and Sir Frederick Sykes both assured me that the Davidson memorandum practically expressed the views of Mr. Bonar Law.
Yes, practically. I should like to have had that assurance from Mr. Bonar Law himself.
Well, shall I arrange to see him? I can leave immediately.
No, it would be wrong to exert any sort of pressure on the Prime Minister now. He's in great distress. We must shift for ourselves. Can we then abstract the chief points from the memorandum?
The case against Lord Curzon is interesting, I think, and a very significant one for the House of Commons.
The Conservative Party can't fail to be embarrassed already by the fact that of the 5 Secretaries of State, 4 are from the House of Lords.
They are beginning to regret that composition, sir.
So that if Lord Curzon were to become Prime Minister, the embarrassment would be greater than ever.
Absolutely.
Then what about the nuts and bolts of the operation as itemized by Mr. Davidson? He's suggesting that Lord Curzon would find it difficult to form a government without Mr. Baldwin's continuing as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Are we to understand by this that Mr. Baldwin would refuse to serve under Lord Curzon?
I think the wording is ambiguous.
There's an air of ambiguity about the whole provenance of this memorandum. However, Mr. Davidson sees it as quite feasible for Mr. Baldwin to form a government with or without Lord Curzon.
There's clearly no doubt in Mr. Davidson's mind that despite his careful tribute for Lord Curzon's brilliance, that Mr. Baldwin can be the only satisfactory choice.
It's an intelligent yet partisan appraisal, and in that context alone is not without its uses. But we can't depend upon this entirely. We must invite further opinion. Arthur, would you mind?
Of course not, sir.
The electric telephone has never been a favorite device with me.
Yes? This is Stapleton. Yes, Colonel Waterhouse, right? Would you thank the Prime Minister on behalf of His Majesty? Good afternoon, Sir Ronald.
Apparently the Prime Minister has undertaken to summon Lord Salisbury to London to add an impartial voice in the matter.
It's very civil of him to arrange this. I only hope he isn't overtaxing his resources. But Lord Salisbury, impartial?
Oh, I think he's aware of the peculiar difficulties of the situation, sir. We can count on good sense from him.
Well, that I have no doubts at all. But we can't be unaware that Lord Salisbury's father was a major architect in Lord Curzon's early political career, and that Lord Salisbury himself is, allegedly, a close friend of his.
It can't be much longer, surely, before you hear.
A day or two at most.
I suppose nothing could go wrong now, could it?
There's nobody else. There is nobody else.
Well, I'm sure you're right. I just keep just waiting, that's all.
We might both do worse in the meantime than to occupy our minds with the problem of how we intend to make use of number 10.
I've been thinking about that already. How successful the redecorations will be depends entirely on what you're prepared to spend on them.
We can't be miserly, Grace. Not in this matter.
I'm glad about that.
In any event, we could always take some of the furniture from Carlton House Terrace to Downing Street. Anything would be more acceptable than the Gothic horrors cluttering the place at present.
I think if we're going to talk seriously about this, then we should get it all down on paper. I want to be certain that you don't conveniently forget however much you're talking of spending now.
Lady Curzon, difficult little creature that you are, this is the crowning achievement of our lives. Shall we work together for once, instead of being constantly in opposition?
I'm very grateful to you, Lord Salisbury, for interrupting your weekend like this. I hope it hasn't caused too many difficulties.
My one concern is to be of assistance, Lord Stamford. I had a long talk with the Prime Minister this morning.
Ah, yes. I gather from Colonel Waterhouse that you were at Onslow Gardens by 8 o'clock.
I took the milk train.
Oh, very uncomfortable for you. How was Mr. Bonar Law?
The change since I last saw him is very apparent.
This illness of his is catastrophic.
I'm afraid it is. I'm afraid it is.
May I ask, what was the substance of your conversation?
I could understand, and to a considerable extent share in, his misgivings as to a successor. But I pointed out to him that I could see no way in which Lord Curzon could be rejected in favour of Mr. Baldwin.
You did?
One needs an enormous backlog of experience on which to rely when one becomes Prime Minister. And that experience Mr. Baldwin simply does not possess.
And what was Mr. Bonar Law's reply to that?
We discussed the matter at length, despite his evident discomfort. Ultimately, he gave me the impression that in this very grave and complex situation, he would, on the whole, be disinclined to pass over Lord Curzon.
He gave you the impression? Now, forgive me, but for His Majesty's sake, I need something more reliable. Is that an impression? Did he tell you, in those many words, on what you've just rehearsed to me?
I'm in a quandary, Stamford. In all honesty, I must report that Bonar Law felt about to realize that Curzon was the final choice, be he a pis-aller or not. Equally, I must say that the Prime Minister was in some distress, and his opinions were necessarily those of a very sick man. I should hesitate to have those opinions passed on to the King as Bonar Law's unclouded last word in the matter.
I greatly appreciate your candor, thank you. Now, how do you feel about it all?
George Curzon is a very great man. Of course, he has faults, many of them. But who in high places hasn't? Yet I'm also bound to add that George has bellowed over the years, and his work, both in cabinet and abroad, over the past 6 years in particular, has commanded a very wide respect.
Indeed it has.
He's less authoritarian now. He's better able to rally the recalcitrant to his side. For my part, he's the only acceptable Prime Minister in the present situation.
and I most strongly recommend that the king should send for him.
George! Oh, George, do hurry up!
Just a moment.
Now, George, now! There's a letter for you.
Oh, Miss Monday. Where is it?
Here. Oh, I've been dying to open it for 5 minutes.
Postmark London. Typewritten. What on earth can this be from?
Open it and find out or I'll box your ears. Well...
It's from Bonar Law.
My dear George, I'm sorry to say that I find it necessary to resign. I understand that it is not customary for the king to ask the Prime Minister to recommend his successor in circumstances like the present, and I presume that he will not do so. But if, as I hope, he accepts my resignation at once, he will have to take immediate steps about my successor.
It's extraordinary.
What did I tell you? Beaverbrook's behind this. You must go back to London at once and talk to Bonar Law.
I shall do nothing so intemperate.
Intemperate? To fight for what's rightfully yours.
Grace, had Bonar wished to see me, he would have said so in the letter. But he quite evidently wants to be left alone.
How can he let you down like this?
He's behaving according to his lights. He has no intention of being involved in a wrangle over the succession. But he could perfectly well have put in a word for me to the king. Is that too much to expect? I'm utterly bewildered.
So what happens now?
The king will be taking advice.
But the king must surely know that you're the only candidate.
I'm perfectly certain that His Majesty will not forget my record of public service.
But he can't be swayed by personal preference in an issue of this nature.
Nor can he entrust an inexperienced politician like Baldwin with the full weight of office.
But the king has always been aware of the public temper. Eton, Balliol, and All Souls cut less ice now than they did at the start of your career. Asquith and King George between them have already curbed the power of the Lords. It seems to me, it very much seems to me, that the king has the makings of another constitutional crisis here.
I don't begin to follow you.
Oh, yes, you do, George. You're much too clever not to. I'm talking about privilege and lack of privilege. I'm talking about inherited control, and I'm talking about elected control. Sooner or later, one of these has finally to yield to the other. It could be next week. The king's choice of a new prime minister could radically affect the balance of power as between upper and lower house.
You do realize what you're implying, don't you?
I do. And it begins to frighten me. Because I think it will come to this. That if you aren't summoned to the palace next week, no member of the House of Lords will ever again serve as Prime Minister of this country. The king is in an intolerable position.
Aren't you enjoying the band? Georgie?
I'm sorry, Yes, the band's excellent, quite excellent. I shall see our thanks are conveyed to them all.
You've been very quiet all day.
I'm worried about Mr. Bonar Law.
Mm-hmm. He has the country's press. And ours.
I'm afraid that's small compensation for the loss of such a man in such times as these. And in so hideous a manner.
Whatever age we live in, we always think the times are bad. But we've lived through worse. We've lived through a world war.
Perhaps you don't see what I mean, May. The challenges presented to us now are even greater because they're more insidious. I could only put it like this. The war led us to feed on stimulants. Now we're back to sober diets. And there's no glamour. In economic campaigns, there's no excitement. The very meaning of patriotism is on shifting ground. The people are listening for a definitive voice to give them a sense of unity again. And unity is now in hazard because of the illness of the Prime Minister.
Have you made up your mind yet about his successor?
I'm afraid I haven't entirely. That's what's concerning me.
I imagine Lord Curzon must be waiting to be called.
I imagine so. And very reasonably. He's given a lifetime of devotion to the Empire.
Would he be a successful Prime Minister?
He'd be a greatly ambitious one. In the interest of the state.
Is that any kind of drawback to it?
Oh, Curzon's a dedicated imperialist, but to be such in 1923 is no easy matter. I've no doubt he'd propose the annexation of China if he thought she offered the remotest threat to India.
I think the people, at present, are more concerned with setting Britain to rights than in extending the empire. Do you think Lord Curzon could command their loyalty in the way that Mr. Lloyd George did? Or Mr. Bonar Law?
If I could answer that, May, I should no longer be in this dilemma. I need further opinion, and quickly. We can't admit of any sort of hiatus before a successor is appointed. Oh, Daniel!
Your Majesty?
Would you see if you can reach Lord Stamford by telephone? I should like to speak to him immediately.
Yes, of course.
Must be nerve-wracking for Curzon and Baldwin, having to wait it out like this.
It must be dreadful, but they chose to enter public life. They're aware of its tensions, I'm sure.
In general, yes. That's not entirely appropriate in this case. They aren't competing in an open election. They are waiting to be chosen by a single judge on the results of past performance and future possibilities. That's a very different, a very special situation.
Sir, I have Lord Stamford on for you.
No, thank you, Daniel. I shall come at once. Arthur?
Yes, sir.
You had an opportunity to talk to Lord Salisbury?
At some length. He saw the Prime Minister first, who felt disinclined to ignore Lord Curzon's claim. Though Salisbury did insist that Mr. Bonar Law is a sick man, and that the sentiment must be judged in that context.
I understand. And what of Lord Salisbury himself?
He goes strong for Curzon, sir.
I suppose that was inevitable.
He made out a persuasive case for his choice.
I'm sure he would. Lord Salisbury is nothing if not persuasive.
If it's any help, sir.
Yes, Arthur?
I'm very much inclined to favor Lord Curzon myself.
And as always, your opinion is of the highest value to me. Thank you.
Is there anything else I can do, sir? I realize how appallingly difficult the situation is becoming.
I'm inclined to think I should talk to one more conservative. Someone with considerable experience of practical government and someone beyond the pale of the present lobbying.
Lord Balfour?
I think he's our man, don't you? Would you ask him to call on you tomorrow without delay, if his health permits? Otherwise, dear old boy, I'm going to have to ask you to call on him yourself.
I'll be in touch with him directly, sir.
Thank you. As I see it now, the choice must be made within 48 hours. Lord Balfour must be our last point of reference.
I'm glad we have the fire lit. It's warm enough by day, but evenings are still damp. Oh, George, do stop prowling around and sit down.
I wish I could settle. I wish I could enjoy anything at the moment.
But you can't be worried, can't you? Not seriously.
There's no logical reason why I should be worried, but I can't help it. I've waited so long for this moment. I think I've been waiting for it ever since Oxford.
You're the only one who is worrying. No one else is.
But no one else in British history has ever pulled it off. The Grand Slam, Viceroy of India, and Prime Minister of Great Britain. It's what I've worked for all my life. A crowning achievement. I'm 64 now. And if it goes wrong this time, the opportunity will never come again. Will you pour me a brandy, darling?
Oh, yes, of course. I've never known you so apprehensive. In the past, you've accepted every new honor, every new responsibility as your right. George, there is no one else. Your place is secure.
Thank you. Oh. No, I suppose you're right. My only concern is this, that since Bonar has refused to name a successor, the king will have to search around for advice.
Is there anyone you know who won't come down on your side?
Beaverbrook. And Rothermere, to begin with.
But the king would never consult with newspaper men. Not in a matter as important as this.
Well, then who?
Arthur Balfour, perhaps?
My God, I hope not.
Oh, why do you say that? Arthur may be unpremeditated, but you've known him all your professional lives. He would never advise that the Tory party be controlled by a tyrant like Baldwin.
Balfour has always been, and still is, the most unreliable figure on the English political scene.
Oh, sure. Really? You're prejudiced and you know it.
Of course I'm prejudiced, and of course I know it. I've had a quarter of a century's experience of his methods, and I detest them.
Nevertheless, he has an adequate, still.
He has immense personal charm, and he's used it quite unscrupulously all his life. Of course he has a following. He has this extraordinary magnetism. But as a servant of the state, he's the most spectacular failure I know.
You're jealous, aren't you? That he made Prime Minister sooner than you might. But don't you see, whether you admire him or not, he's of your breed. Whatever differences there may have been between you, Arthur will never betray his caste. He's peerage now just as you are, and he has all the passion of the newly converted.
If only you knew him as I do. Grace, when I was appointed Viceroy of India at the age of 39, the youngest man ever to assume that responsibility, the world was totally at my feet. And so long as Salisbury remained Prime Minister, I was given virtually a free hand in India. The moment Balfour succeeded Salisbury, the pinpricks and the naggings began. When my first term of office ended and I returned to England, Balfour made it very clear to me that he did not wish me to become Viceroy a second time. He became closely involved in my struggle with Kitchener, and mine was not the side he took. Thereafter, during my second term of office, he lost no opportunity to clash with my policies, to interfere with my appointments, and to widen the rift between the army and myself.
You must clearly understand, George, that your prolonged quarrel with Kitchener over this irritating situation of the military member is becoming a matter of scandal and concern within the cabinet. Should I need to remind you that it was entirely on your insistence that Kitchener was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Army in India, against the wishes and advice of your friends and colleagues? Very well, you got him. You knew his reputation, you knew of his extraordinary influence at the highest levels in England, but you got him. And now you must come to an accommodation with it, before this bickering of yours threatens the entire administrative morale of the Indian Empire.
Kitchener appears to believe that his authority in India is as great as mine, if not greater. Would you, as Prime Minister, allow yourself to be bullied into an untenable situation by the Commander-in-Chief of the Army in Great Britain? Arthur, I must make this quite clear to you. Unless you concur with me that the military arm is subservient to the civil arm, we are heading on a direct course for anarchy.
He is Kitchener of Khartoum, and you are Curzon of Chesterton. Don't you understand the implications of those titles? Kitchener's successes in Egypt and the Sudan have made him well-nigh unassailable in the affections of the British people. He's a myth, a legend. And you, George, are a civilian administrator. Don't, I beg you, provoke a final head-on conflict, because Kitchener de facto carries all the guns.
For which you provide him with all the ammunition.
As Prime Minister, my responsibility is both to Britain and the Empire. India is part of that responsibility. How can I possibly stand by and watch with amusement the growing disaffection of the army in India?
Then I may take it that in a final show of strength, you support Kitchener.
You may take it, George, but I want tranquility in India, not turbulence.
Then allow me to observe that your dedication to the quiet life, your passion for laissez-faire, your preoccupation with compromise will threaten the very foundations of civil rule in India. And if Kitchener is allowed any further concessions, I shall have no hesitation in offering my resignation to King Edward.
That must remain a matter for your own political conscience.
And you're aware what happened, Grace. I was obliged, on principle, to tender my resignation. And the King, clearly acting on Balfour's advice, accepted it. All the effort, all the journeys, all the problems solved, and the frontier crises overcome, all the ill health that Mary suffered, and the difficulties of my own illness. All those years of selfless administration gone for nothing. A defeat, a blemish, a disgrace. And when Mary died, shortly after our return to a shoddy reception in England, I believed the time had come to put an end to my political ambition.
Oh, not for you, George. Never for you. Ambition you could never escape from.
Perhaps not. But I re-entered the arena a different man. I determined that never again would I resign high office. Never again would I voluntarily surrender the power it took me so long to re-establish. I'm within days of ultimate office now, and I hope and pray that Arthur Balfour is not formally canvassed for his opinion as to the future leadership of this country, because a man more unreliable and time-serving this country has never seen.
I don't think you need have any words on that score. I understand that Arthur's far from well and far away from any politicking with the Davenants in Sheridan.
Yes, what is it? Arthur, rouse yourself, old fellow. Get a telegram for you.
Balfour is the worst, the most dangerous of British foreign ministers with whom I've been brought into contact in my entire public life.
It's from Stanford.
What the devil does he want?
My advice, Edgar, my advice.
Balfour may appear the most scintillating of men, but he has no depth of feeling, no profound convictions, and, strange to say, no real affection for anyone at all.
But if Bonar Law openly thrown in the towel, then who's to follow him?
I hear what Stanford has to say, then I'll tell you what he ought to be thinking.
Surely George Curzon is the only possibility.
Is that what you believe?
The characteristics that made him a failure as a foreign minister made him a failure as prime minister. The man was and is intellectually indolent.
Have I time for a kipper before the Norwich train leaves?
I think we might rustle up a kipper for you, Arthur. Would you prefer coffee or champagne?
Balfour would drop or sacrifice anyone without a pang. And I know. He destroyed me in India.
Bye, Arthur. Hurry back, would you? Snooker tomorrow, if not today. All right, station master, I think you can go now.
Goodbye,
Arthur.
And keep away from the pond.
Were any one of his intimates to die suddenly, Arthur Balfour would dine out that night with undisguised complacency, and in the intervals of conversation or bridge, he'd be heard to murmur, "Poor old George."
So you begin to appreciate the difficulties with which the king is faced.
Indeed. And for that very reason, I think we must therefore confine ourselves to consideration of the problems that a Prime Minister, who is also a member of the House of Lords, would encounter.
We are aware, of course, of the high proportion of peers already holding cabinet appointments.
Yes, that's the first of the problems, and the second naturally follows from it. Can you begin to imagine the resentment that the House of Commons would feel if a peer were also to be made Prime Minister? In effect, the Commons would be entirely controlled by the Lords. And this in 1923 is a ludicrous proposition.
These considerations have naturally been reviewed, but I'm grateful for your estimation of the Commons' likely temper in that event.
Thirdly, and I think most important of all, would be the situation vis-à-vis the Labour Party. Labour presently holds the majority of opposition seats in the Commons, but it's scarcely represented in the Lords at all. It would therefore be unable to challenge or to question a Prime Minister who sat in the Lords. And that, Stanford, would be the final affront to a supposedly democratic system of government.
Yes. And of the two gentlemen in question, have you any observations to make as to their capabilities for Prime Ministership?
I should prefer to deal solely with the constitutional situation, which I've done already. To comment on the respective merits of the individuals in question would be invidious. On the one hand, my knowledge of Lord Curzon is based on an intimate and lifelong friendship, and a recognition of his quite exceptional qualifications. On the other hand, my knowledge of Mr. Baldwin is slight, and so far his public career has been
more or less uneventful, with no signs of special gifts or outstanding ability.
It comes to this, then. You feel that Lord Curzon is the more capable candidate, but that his nomination would grossly affront the Commons.
Lord Stamford, I believe I've said enough already. The unpleasant dotting of I's and crossing of T's I must regretfully leave to you. In this affair, I can only act as an advisor, not as a sponsor.
Arthur, you're back! What's the gossip from London?
What I should like now, Edgar, what I should very much appreciate, would be a glass of extremely cold Chablis.
Don't be so provoking, Arthur, and tell us what happened. Will dear George be chosen?
No, my pet, dear George will not.
It's Stamfordham, Your Majesty. Lord Balfour did call on me. I'm afraid the quandary is deeper than ever.
George? I do believe there's a policeman bicycling up the path.
Policeman? Good God, you're right.
But what can he be wanting so late in the evening?
This is something I must attend to myself. The Constable. Good evening.
Yes, evening, my lord. I got a telegram for you, I have. Postmistress just wrote to my house not 10 minutes ago.
Telegram?
Lord, from London.
Thank you. Would you wait a moment? It may be necessary for me to reply.
Yes, sir.
Would it be possible for me to see you tomorrow? Stamfordham.
Pardon me, Lord?
Constable, there is a reply. That is indeed a reply, an immediate reply. Have you pencil and paper about you?
Notebook, somewhere. Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes. Are you ready?
Yes, sir. What is the reply to be?
The addressee, the person to whom I'm replying, is Lord Stamfordham at Buckingham Palace.
Buckingham Palace? I know, sir. And the message?
I will be at Carlton House Terrace at 1:20. Signed, Curzon.
I will be at Carlton House Terrace at 1:20. Signature, Curzon.
Splendid accuracy, Constable. I thank you. And will you ensure it goes off immediately?
Oh, I'll rouse him, my lord. I'll rouse him.
A florin should cover the cost. No. Look here, there's £50. And I hope you'll drink my health when your duties are completed.
What is it, George? What's happened?
The summons to London. It's come at last.
Newspapers are entirely in your favor, George.
Except for the Times, as you might expect. The Times never ceases to snipe at me, and purely because I'm a member of the House of Lords.
But the Telegraph, have you seen the editorial?
It's very comforting.
Oh, comforting. George, this is the most exciting journey of our lives. Within 6 hours at most, you'll be pregnant.
And you will be first hostess of the land.
I didn't mean to do it, you know. I thought the opportunity would never present itself.
The trouble is that throughout our married life, you've always had less faith in my political future than I possess.
No quarrel. Now we can begin to plan in earnest.
I think we should visit number 10 once I've been to the palace. The press will expect it, and I should like you to have a good look round.
Oh, yes, of course. It would be marvelous, absolutely marvelous. Oh, but George, we shan't live there, shall we? It's such a boring house.
I think the answer is to use number 10 for official purposes only. We shall continue to live at Carlton House Terrace and do all our entertaining from there.
Oh, entertaining, can you imagine? But the food of office will be very expensive. Have you thought of that?
I've thought of little else this weekend. But I've no intention of letting my term of office go down in history as a niggardly one. If necessary, I shall sell Montacute and taxi. So long as we have Chesterton and Carlton House Terrace, we can manage perfectly successfully.
Well, I think there's room for discussion there, but the most immediate question is this. When shall we hold the celebratory dinner at whom shall we invite?
Even more entertaining, Gracie. Whom shall we not invite?
Thank you for coming to town so early, Miss Baldwin. Today is going to be enormously difficult, and His Majesty hopes you'll understand the nature of these difficulties and bear with him a little longer.
Yes, of course.
Now then, all the advice we've so far taken results in 2 points emerging. The first, that to invite a peer to become Prime Minister would impose excessive strain upon the House of Commons. Second, that Lord Curzon's experience and talents most properly fit him for the post.
I can't argue with either of those propositions, nor would I wish to.
However, I should like us to think hypothetically for a moment or two, and I stress this is hypothesis only.
If it's your need to indulge in hypothesis, then it's my pleasure to hear you out.
Thank you. So now, suppose the situation arose in which you were entrusted to carry on the government. Would you be prepared to retain Lord Curzon as Foreign Minister?
I would welcome the notion, believe me. But I've been given to understand by Mr. Bonar Law's private secretary that in the event of Lord Curzon's not being offered the premiership, he would feel unable to serve under anyone else.
But suppose Lord Curzon were persuaded to remain in office as Foreign Minister, what then?
I should be delighted to work with him. His experience would be invaluable. Hypothetically speaking, of course.
Thank you.
But I must reaffirm what I've maintained from the start. I have no ambition to become Prime Minister of this country. If Lord Curzon is offered the post, I shall gladly continue as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Lord Stamfordham, this is the work I love. This is the work I feel competent to deal with.
Today, even Paddington looks terrific.
The express has gained half a minute on the overall journey. A good omen, I fancy.
George, you have a reception committee on your hands.
The press are quick off the mark today.
This really clinches it, doesn't it?
I should have thought so. They wouldn't be wasting their time on an also-ran. Shall we meet them, Gracie? All smiles for the photograph you of. Come in, Lord Stamfordham. You've met my wife, haven't you?
Good afternoon, Lady Curzon.
Lord Stamfordham, how good to see you again.
You're very kind.
You won't object if Grace remains with us. I'd like her to hear the news along with me.
Well, of course, that's entirely up to you, Lord Curzon.
Well, then do sit down, please.
Thank you so much.
I imagine you've had a busy weekend of it.
I've known quieter times, certainly.
The news is good, isn't it?
His Majesty has been faced with a situation of, well, I think I may say a situation of almost unparalleled difficulty. Let me say first that the King was most offended at not being informed of Mr. Bonar Law's hasty return to England, nor of his intention to resign, nor of his resignation itself.
I fully sympathize with His Majesty. Shortly before the Prime Minister left for his cruise, he categorically denied that he would resign. I was not made aware of it myself, officially, until yesterday morning when I received his letter at Montacute.
The King had no idea whatsoever that anything was amiss, until he read about it in the newspapers at Aldershot. What further exacerbated the situation was Mr. Bonar Law's refusal to give any advice as to his successor, despite a request from His Majesty. The upshot of all this is that I've been in London since yesterday morning seeing Lord Salisbury and other politicians.
Amongst them Lord Balfour, perhaps?
Lord Salisbury and other politicians. In any event, the King fully recognizes your preeminent claims, immeasurably superior, were his words, to those of any other candidate. These claims are such as to entitle you to expect the succession for which His Majesty regards you as in every way qualified.
I'm deeply grateful for His Majesty's kindness.
And we both are, Lord Chancellor.
Nevertheless,
I beg your pardon.
Nevertheless, the largest section of opposition to the present government is the Labour opposition, and as that party is not represented in the House of Lords, it seems judicious to His Majesty that the future leader of the government must be in the House of Commons, where he may answer the Labour leader with full authority.
What are you trying to tell me?
The situation being what it is, I regret that of necessity His Majesty has decided to appoint Mr. Stanley Baldwin.
It can't be true.
Wait.
I'm sorry, but it can't be true.
Lord Stanton, I'm indebted to His Majesty for the honour he has done me in sending me a personal explanation. I presume I may be allowed to comment on it.
Of course. Please.
Since the King has expressed such high confidence as to my career and service, surely he must realize that the slur implied in Mr. Baldwin's supersession will be all the greater. There is another factor. If His Majesty excludes me from this office, he will in effect be laying down the doctrine for the first time in British history that a peer can never again be Prime Minister. I must earnestly protest against this. It involves an additional and a perpetual and a cruel disability on the order of the House to which I belong.
Circumstances may change, Lord Curzon. They may alter.
There's a further consideration. The King's decision, if it obtains, will render my position in the government difficult, if not impossible. My retirement at this moment will not strengthen the government at home or abroad, where so many critical negotiations are in my hands.
That the King must, of course, assume full responsibility, though His Majesty has expressed a desire that your services should be retained.
But all these considerations, have they, I wonder, been present in the mind of the King when he made his decision? May I respectfully ask you to bring them to his attention before he finally acts?
Oh, I shall see that the King is informed.
It is just after 3:15. What time did His Majesty propose to send for Mr. Baldwin?
In the course of the afternoon, I imagine, before he returned to Aldershot this evening.
So, my views may still carry weight.
Your views will never go disregarded. Good afternoon, Lady Curzon. Lord Curzon.
Oh. So great. How ghastly. How absolutely ghastly.
It is at once our necessity, our prerogative, and our pleasure, Mr. Baldwin, to desire you to act as the head of the government, led until recently by Mr. Bonar Law.
I am deeply honored, Your Majesty, but still totally apprehensive. The position of leader has been offered to me when I'm inexperienced, before I'm really fitted for it, by a succession of curious chances that could never have been foreseen. I have never expected it. I am in no way trained for it.
I understand your misgivings, and I appreciate your honesty. But will you accept the post?
Oh, with respect, sir, Lord Curzon is in every way more qualified to lead them than I am.
Lord Curzon is a non-parry. But you must be aware of the problems inherent in our inviting a member of the House of Lords to become Prime Minister.
They're immense, sir, it's true, but Lord Curzon is your man. I'm sure of it.
The thing is this, Mr. Baldwin. I'm convinced that my responsibility to the country, to my people, makes it imperative that the new Prime Minister should be chosen from the House of Commons. Were Lord Curzon to be appointed, and the experiment failed, the Crown would be regarded as being completely out of touch with public feelings. And rightly. I hope you will understand my dilemma, as I understand yours.
Then I can only promise Your Majesty that I shall do all in my power to justify the privilege and the responsibility you have so graciously offered me.
You have our prayers, as well as our congratulations, Mr. Baldwin.
You see, Ray, virtually every newspaper carries the same story. Utter bewilderment that Baldwin should have been chosen.
I've seen something else. The king saw Mr. Baldwin at 3:15 yesterday afternoon.
But that's impossible.
See for yourself.
And it was at 3:15 p.m. that Mr. Baldwin was received by His Majesty. So, while Stamford was still here.
Exactly.
While he was still assuring me that my observations would be presented to the king, Baldwin was accepting office. Oh, Grace, when Balfour and Kitchener between them destroyed my tenure as Viceroy of India, I thought my heart would break. When poor Mary died so soon afterwards, I believed that life could hold no greater misery for me. But this surpasses them all.
Georgie! Georgie! Are you there?
Yes, I'm just taking the air.
You must try to stop worrying. The decision has been made, and I'm sure it was for the best.
I hope so. Indeed, I hope so.
Come inside. Quite chilly in the garden now the sun's gone down.
In a moment. I keep thinking of those two men, May. What they must be feeling now. Mr. Baldwin, worried and bewildered. Lord Curzon, utterly wretched.
I've already said this once, darling. But I'll say it again because I'm not going to let you have any more sleepless nights. Mr. Baldwin and Lord Curzon chose to be statesmen. They knew the risks involved. They knew all about the frustrations and miseries of high office. They've known all along that this country must have a prime minister and that we can only have one prime minister at a time. But they chose to lead this life of theirs. Oh, what is it that dear old dog says in Much Ado? Can you remember? Yes, I've got it. God's a good man. When two men ride a horse, one must ride behind.
I'd forgotten. How right he was.
Well then, you were the one who had to decide who should sit in front, not them. You had no choice in the matter of being king. They had every choice in the matter of being politicians. Yours is the loneliest and hardest task, Georgie.
Dear May, you're a great comfort to me. Did you know that? What keeps occurring to me is irony of the situation. I've had to pass over a great man in favor of a reluctant, if capable man. And what the loss could be to the nation, I can only begin to imagine.
There's a letter from Stanley Baldwin.
Oh, what can that man possibly have to say to you?
He wants me to take luncheon with him tomorrow.
Oh, you will refuse, of course. No, you will, won't you?
I'm intrigued to know what he has to say.
Well, it's quite obvious what he'll have to say, and it's equally obvious what you will have to reply.
Well, there's nothing to be lost by meeting him.
Oh, there's everything that you self-respect. You made it clear to Bonar Law that you could not accept office under a prime minister other than himself. That prime minister has been appointed, and he can only wish to see you to beg you to continue as foreign minister under him.
The problem is that so many negotiations are in progress under my direction that it would be dangerous to discontinue my control now.
You see what I mean? Already you're preparing to act as a subordinate again.
No use our wasting time, George. His Majesty wishes you to continue as foreign minister. And it's my wish also. We need your experience and diplomacy more than ever before.
I have every desire to stand down. I feel my work is done.
It's scarcely started, in international affairs at any rate. We both know you should have become Prime Minister. We both know why I was chosen instead. I realize it's an absurd and cruel situation for you. I can only appeal to you as a Conservative and as a patriot. If you should choose to resign, I shall perfectly understand. But I hope it won't come to that. I hope for you. The King requests you. The nation wants you. The Empire needs you.
George!
In the study. Hello, darling. You're looking very bright about the eyes. What have you been up to?
I'm just been down to Thomas Cook's. We can have a stateroom on the next suitable cruiser that's sailing for Buenos Aires.
But when would that be?
10 days' time.
But why so soon? Your Argentine affairs have waited for months. Couldn't they wait a few months more?
But what's to keep us here now?
I shall be back in Lausanne in 10 days' time.
I don't believe it.
You'd better see what I've written to Baldwin.
Baldwin? He has you dancing to his tune already.
That's very far from the case. He's dancing to mine.
George, let me think. As my retirement at this moment might be thought to involve distrust in your administration, I will for the present continue as a foreigner. And you're going to stand this?
I have no real option. Now, you must see it, surely.
You can turn him down flat and let him sort out Lausanne himself.
It's not as straightforward as that.
It's totally straightforward. You swore that if anyone else became Prime Minister, you'd never work under him. Yet only 2 days after your ultimate humiliation, you're sitting up at Baldwin's table on your hind legs begging for a bowl.
That's unjust and untrue.
It's entirely true. You've gone back on your word and everyone will know it. You're a trimmer, George. You'd rather hang on as a messenger boy than surrender office completely.
I'm not thinking of Baldwin, I'm thinking of the country.
You're thinking of yourself. You need to feel you're at the center of things. You like to believe you're running the empire. But all you're doing is to play the elderly nursemaid to an ironmaster's son.
That's enough, Grace.
It's more than enough. I could live with you in victory. I could stand by you in honorable defeat. But this cap in hand appeasement is more than I can take. I shall go to Hackwood tomorrow. You can reach me there if you can find any reason to.
Have you no conception of the meaning of duty?
In your vocabulary, duty is a very elastic word. The only duty you recognize is your own presence in the hierarchy of power. How you know doesn't matter so long as you're in there somewhere. You won't miss me, George. Not really. There'll be plenty to occupy you while I'm away. There always is.
Grace!
You better finish that letter, if it's to reach Baldwin in good time.
I will, for the present, continue at the Foreign Office. Yours sincerely, Curzon. Oh, Anderson.
My lord?
I'd like this letter to go to number 10. Downing Street, you understand?
My lord.
There's no need to send it through post. You can take it yourself.
Directly, sir.
On the instant. Oh, Anderson, don't take a cab. They're ruinously expensive. It's just as fast to walk from here.
Very good, my lord.
Thank you, Anderson.
My name is George Nathaniel Curzon. I am a most superior person. My cheek is pink, my hair is sleek. I dine at Blenheim once a week.
Weekend at Montacute, by Michael Robson, the part of Lord Curzon was played by Paul Rogers, Grace Curzon by Mary Wimbush, and Stanley Baldwin by Alan Rowe. King George V, John Westbrook, Queen Mary, Margaret Robertson, Andrew Bonar Law, Malcolm Hayes, Lord Stamfordham, Hayden Jones, Lord Balfour, William Fox, Lord Beaverbrook, Peter Marinka, Lord Crewe, Noel Iliff, Lord Salisbury, James Thomason, John Davidson, John Rowe, Colonel Sir Ronald Waterhouse, Garrard Green, Sir John Lavery, David Graham, and a police constable, William Edel. The play was produced and directed by David Spencer